and welcome. I feel honored to be the first speaker in this esteemed group today. And my talk today is called Holistic Productivity. And before I get into what that actually means, I just want to give you a very brief life story and just tell you how I came to be here today. So my background is in engineering. I have a degree in electrical engineering from way back in 1990, and I worked as a software engineer for about 6 years. I think my geekiest claim to fame is that I used to develop SCSI device drivers in 68,000 assembly language, and so I've had my hands very dirty when it comes to the technology. And then I kind of stepped up to more management roles after that, managed some very large projects, managed teams of engineers. And back in 2003, I decided I was going to venture off on my own, and I created a company called Technically Simple. And I've grown up with all this wonderful technology that's emerged, and I had this vision of technology making our lives just so much easier, and we'll have so much free time and time with friends and family and creative, and that's pretty much the way it worked out, is it? Yeah, pretty close. So I created the company to look at this kind of what to me was kind of a contradiction between having all this wonderful technology and having life be sometimes more stressful than ever. And I found coaching played a big role in the work I was doing, so I became professionally trained as a coach as well, and started a coaching practice on the side. And then back in 2008, my life literally changed overnight. I got very, very sick. I developed severe pain in my body and went into our local hospital in Vancouver, and I found out I had a stage 4 cancer, and it was a very aggressive cancer. Like, I had to get treatment, and I was wondering at that point if I was even going to see the end of 2008. It was very, very serious. And so I went through quite a roller coaster ride through chemotherapy sessions, had a 6-hour surgery, and it was later that year, just before Christmas, I got the best gift I could possibly have asked for, which is a call from the surgeon to say, we can't find any cancer, and you got a clean bill of health. And so I was talking to someone at a party last night, and he says, well, it sounds like this is the best thing that's ever happened to you and the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And that's very true, because it was something that really aligned me, got me clear on what it is I want out of life, and what I'm willing to take on and what I'm not willing to take on. And so I established myself, called myself a productivity coach and consultant. Really went down that productivity path. And I coined this term called holistic productivity. And first of all, I want to just say what productivity is, because that's a term that tends to get thrown around a lot these days. And my definition is that it's just about producing whatever results you want to in life. So that could be writing a report or proposal, it could be working on a project in a group situation, or it could be spending a day at the beach if the result you want to produce is relaxation, a nice suntan. And the holistic part comes in that I find the most powerful way to approach productivity is to look at the whole picture of life. So a lot of times we talk about work life and personal life and things like that, and in a sense those don't really exist. All there is life, and there's different facets to life. And any shift that we create in one area is going to, either to a large or small extent, affect other areas of life. So a lot of times I work with people who want to create a shift at work, but they go to work on their relationship or on their health or something like that. And I have the privilege of working specifically with people who are using OmniFocus. I have clients literally all over the planet. And when I work with people for the first time, I find that people are often very eager to kind of dive into the technology. It's tempting to just kind of say, okay, how do I use this thing? And I just want to use it better. But I purposely hit the pause button at that point and say, let's look at the Omni before we get into the focus. So an exercise we go through is to map out their areas of focus in getting things done, or GTD terms. And so they can see, what am I actually responsible for? Because it's pretty hard to set up an effective system if you're not really clear at a higher level what it is you're tracking, what it is you're assuming responsibility for. So we start off very basic, what are the two or three main areas of their life, and then we expand that out. And usually we go about 3 or 4 levels deep and really drill into the details. And at that point, people generally gasp and say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe this is my life." And it just feels like there's so much going on. But it is, in a way, a very sobering moment too. It's just like saying, "Okay, yeah, I have an appropriate amount on my plate, or maybe I'm taking too much on right now, or there's stuff I could delegate." And we take that mind map, and it doesn't always translate exactly, but it becomes a good starting point for creating the OmniFocus structure. So one way this might be implemented, this is the way I do it personally, is to have business and personal folders, and then to go in there and basically have one folder for each of these different areas of responsibility. And one of the reasons I promote this approach is it becomes a checklist. So if your fun and recreation folder is completely empty, that's a sign that maybe that's an area that needs a little more focus. And a concept that I find people don't tend to get from the beginning is this whole notion of single action lists. And the way I suggest using single action lists is to represent an area of focus. So by definition, they don't have a beginning and an end. These are just areas of your life, whether it's car maintenance or your health, that are ongoing, and there's going to be certain tasks to keep those on track. So just an example here would be, just in general, I do public speaking, and so I've created public speaking as a single action list for those one-off tasks related to public speaking. And then, by contrast, parallel and sequential projects are very useful in cases where there is a defined outcome. So again, in GTD terms of a project, it's got 2 or more actions, and there's a specific outcome that's going to come out of that. So in this particular case, project might be called something like Prepare for OmniFocus Setup Presentation, which I've hopefully completed that one by now. And these little details really make a difference. Sometimes it's tempting to just call it like OmniFocus presentation or something like that, and that doesn't clearly define the objective. So it's very important to name the projects in a way that defines what does done look like. How will I know when this is complete? And then another place where I find people tend to stumble a little bit is in terms of actually articulating the tasks that go with it. And a lot of times the tasks that end up on the list are kind of incomplete thoughts. They haven't been really thought through. So when people actually go to work on that project or that single action list, then they're not exactly sure what to do next, or maybe they don't even have the information they need to move forward. And that's where the procrastination tends to kick in. So it's getting it to a very granular level. So you can almost give it to somebody else to do, and they know exactly what to do. And this is an area I see a lot too, is clients tend to, that I work with, tend to like to dump everything into OmniFocus, and it's certainly capable of holding a vast amount of information, but it's not always the best place to store things. If it's kind of reference type information especially, OmniFocus is maybe not the place to put it, because it can really clutter up the system and ultimately make it unusable. So I always recommend to really keep this a place where you can put actionable things and just be really clear what goes in there and what doesn't go in there. And now when you've got all your tasks in there and you got it well defined, the challenge there is keeping it manageable, so you're not just looking at this list of 300 tasks. And that's where contexts come in, and this is a very, very personal thing in terms of how you use context. But essentially, contexts give you a filter of all of the information that you have in your projects and your single action lists, in a way of just, instead of looking at a long list, you can see a much more specific list. And I also find start dates are very useful. So if something can't be done today, or you're not planning to start it today, then I recommend deferring it to a date in the future. And if you keep deferring things over and over, maybe stop and look at, am I actually going to do this ever? Is there some resistance to doing this? And flip side is only using due dates if an item is actually due, not if you hope to get it done on that day, because that makes it difficult to distinguish what items are actually due and which things are more sort of hopeful completions. And the perspectives feature in OmniFocus, I think, makes all of this usable. So you can have perspectives to say, show me all my important business tasks or everything that I need to focus on first today. And then just to wrap up, I think another one of the the most important elements of GTD and using OmniFocus effectively is to have a regular review process, whether it's a couple of times a week or however often works. And this in GTD terms is called the weekly review. And this is where I've stumbled a lot in the past, and a lot of my clients find it difficult to get into a good routine around this. And what I've been doing for myself, and a lot of my clients are using this too, is to actually have a project for a weekly review, which is simply a checklist of all of the things that happen as part of that. And with the power of OmniFocus, this can be set up such that the project auto-completes when everything's checked off, and then it repeats again a week later. And just to wrap up here, it's very tempting to say, okay, I got to get OmniFocus perfectly configured before I start to use it, and just totally polished up. And that can really be a productivity drain in a way. So it's a matter of just getting a system that seems like it'll work and just trying it for a couple of weeks and then just tweaking along the way. And avoiding too much fiddling that's maybe going to waste time without giving results. I always say unless you play the violin, then fiddling is encouraged. Okay, so thank you very much. These are my websites, technicallysimple.com, timstringer.com is my personal website and blog, and you can follow me on Twitter. Thank you.